Yes, I am Chris Miller. I am the Global Campus Career Counselor. Thank you for joining tonight. I realize this slide title doesn't exactly match uh, the advertised title. Essentially, it's the same thing: finding the right career through a process of starting with career interest assessment. And I asked you to hopefully have a chance to take the free interest ONET interest profiler before this. So hopefully you have some results from that that'll help you as I kind of go through this type of assessment and show you another version of this type of assessment. But if you don't, this is still good information to take with you as you go forward and ideally do complete this assessment in the future. So we'll go ahead and move on here. Um, yep, that's me. I will share my contact information um, at the end also. I guess that's probably the best place to do that then. So I usually start, I'm having some internet problems here. One moment. That should make it better. I usually start these webinars with a look at the career development process, just this little snapshot as I see it, or a decent version as I see it. It's not perfect, but I like that this is a circle that encompasses many of the different aspects of the career development process, and many of these steps happen um, many times throughout a given person's career, which career meaning the span of their time working as several different occupations. So not just one job, but all of the occupations that encompass their career is like kind of the academic term of career for career practitioners. But whenever someone is starting to have some thoughts about changing or having some ideas about exploring other careers, um, it's important to assess what that person is good at doing and what that person is interested in and what's important to that person. So, tonight we're mainly in this yellow section of, knowing yourself via assessment, especially interest in this one, but also values and strengths if you were to do the strong interest inventory, which I'll show later. But also the research part is going to be a big part of this. So exploring options too. But this is something that'll happen, like I said, several times throughout a person's life, as it's known as a kind of a process of growth and decay. So the growth part is, you start to get interested in a certain career or a certain skill set or technical skill, and you'll try to find out a way maybe to utilize that skill. And you're growing, you find a career to pursue, you get that career. This is the process of growth. And after a certain amount of time, there's usually, for most people, the process of decay starts, where they start to lose interest in that. Sometimes it's a loss of a skill. It's usually not, but it's the loss of interest in doing that job. And then the cycle repeats again. So it's a process of growth again in a new area. So like I said, a decent look at the career development process. And we are focusing mainly on the yellow and green sections here tonight. So some general limitations to think about whenever you do any kind of career assessment. And these are some that Richard Bowles identifies on his website, jobhuntersbible.com, which is kind of a companion piece to his iconic career development book, What Color is Your Parachute? But just some general things that he talks about in terms of limitations for these, and that these assessments will try to put you into a category, a group, or a family. So those that answer the test the same way that you did. So because these things deal in categories, they don't really tell you what's unique about you, but rather they end up describing the group that you're in. So for this, it's whatever 2 or 3 letter codes you get for Holland codes, but an INFP or whatever, INTJ for a Myers-Briggs, or there are assessments based on color. So you're a blue or an orange or what have you. So these tests can't tell you anything about you specifically, but they do describe the family you're in. But maybe you're an outlier in that family. So if most people are answering the questions the same way you did, and they are, you know, attracted to any given occupation, like an accountant, and that's what the test will suggest for you. But you might again be an outlier in that group, and you might be better, you know, fitted to something else, not accounting. That maybe that's not an actual interest for you. Um, Always let intuition be your guide. You know more about yourself than any of these tests will. Don't treat any of these outcomes as gospel. So if something seems off, reject the summary that it gives you. So trust your intuition, but also if you really like the suggestions the test gives you, just go ahead and go forward with that. You are never finished with a test and assessment until you've done some good hard thinking about yourself. So these tests can be fun for some people. Some people hate these, but reading the results is just not enough. You're not done until you've thought hard about what distinguishes you from every other member of any group of people, of any group in an occupation. So what makes you unique? With that knowledge, you can help you, you know, determine what you were uniquely meant to do. So those are some of the limitations, really, with any assessment. But of course, tonight talking about career assessment. So the ONET Interest Profiler is built on the Holland typological theory, which gives you there are these six general interest areas that describe not only people, but also occupations. And so the idea behind Holland's theory is that career choice is an expression of one's personality, and that people seek out occupational environments that will be congruent with their personalities. That's not really the way it's thought of today. You know, personality is such a huge and impossible thing to assess, that even with true personality assessments like the MMPI, that would have, you know, hundreds of questions, those assessments are really used to root out psychopathology, so abnormal psychology. Um, with with career assessment nowadays, of course, there are career personality assessments like the Myers-Briggs. Um, but for career interest assessments that actually help you explore careers based on your pattern of interest and disinterest, it's not really personality. I mean, it's everything is a component of personality, but I wouldn't say it's thought of that way today. But Holland thought that personality could be assessed by measuring interests and disinterests for occupations. And then congruence would be the match, basically the general match between a person's given personality and the occupational environment. And then most people usually develop a type between the ages of 18 and 30. And then these are the six general personality types here: realistic, investigative or investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. And I'll talk about a little bit more about each section going forward, but those are the six main personality types, and people generally tend to have a dominant one. It's not always the case, but most people have one area that speaks to them more than all of other areas. The important key concepts for Holland's theory are calculus, consistency, and differentiation. So these are the important things when you're looking at how you scored on the test and where and what your code is, where these letters are, these types are on this hexagon here. So the first part is calculus, which is known as, or is used in this way as the similarity relationship between the six types being depicted by a hexagon in which the most similar types are adjacent to each other and the least similar types are opposite to one another. So what that basically means is there is a statistical significance to the arrangement of this hexagon. So the characteristics, the makeup of a given type, so let's say conventional, C, there is a statistical significance to the R type and the E type, the ones that are adjacent. So the things that make it up, the descriptions that I will give you for these types, conventional and realistic, the types, the interests, the makeup, it's similar. Same thing for conventional and enterprising. They are adjacent to one another on this hexagon. So C is next to R, E is next to C. So for conventional, what is opposite it is artistic. So they are the least similar for this pairing for every other option. So C versus I, C versus S, C versus R, C versus E. C versus A, there's the lowest amount of statistical significance because the characteristics that make up these sections, they're just not very similar. And so it's the same thing for any other given letter. E and I are opposite another. S and R are opposite one another. So that is known as calculus. Consistency, the second concept, is the extent to which the components of the individual subtype or code represent similar characteristics. In other words, whatever you scored highest in, number 1, number 2, number 3, where are those specific types for you on the hexagon? Are you highest in C and then I and then an R, a CIR? Are you highest in C and then next in A? So those would be opposite one another, and then an E, let's say. So a highly consistent code would be ones that have adjacent types. So if you had a highest score in C and then R and then I, CRI are all in a line here on the hexagon. So if someone who has low consistency, it'd be a score that is, say, CAS. C and A are, like I said, opposite one another on the hexagon. So that's the idea of consistency. And there's nothing good or bad about how you score on this hexagon. It just gives you an idea of how correlated your interests are. So if you have interests that are highly correlated, it suggests it'll be easier for you to find some kind of career matches without a lot of assistance, because you're likely better at finding that thing you want to focus on and pursue. The last one I want to share with you is differentiation, and that's how you score in each section. So how well defined, differentiated, or peaked your pattern is. So like I said, most people are really high in one area, whatever it may be, one of the 6 areas here. And then it starts to taper down in terms of scoring. So maybe you're kind of high, but moderate, intermediate in a couple of areas, 2 or 3, and maybe you're low or very low in 1 or 2 or 3 areas. So the idea is if you score really high in one area and then moderate in some and low in some, you have a highly differentiated score and type, which again suggests it'll be easier for you to find something because you have clearly focused your interest in one area. Obviously, if you're really highly interested in everything, it's going to be very difficult to find something that is going to fulfill those interests. And conversely, if you're not interested in anything, you have no interest in any of these things, it's going to be really difficult because you're just not interested in doing any of these things or utilizing any of the skills that make up these different sections. So that's kind of the makeup of the Holland typological theory. And now I'm going to share some information about each of the types and then ask you if you do have your type. So which 3 areas did you score highest in? So whichever one you scored highest in first, and then so on and so forth for the first 3 scores. 3 highest scores would make up your Holland code for this ONET interest profiler. So for the realistic type, so if someone scores highest in realistic, some examples of occupations or fields would be computer engineering, forestry, surveyor, poultry science, farming. Typical traits would be mechanical and athletic abilities, liking to work outdoors and with tools and machines. Might be described as frank, hard-headed, honest, humble, natural, normal, persistent, practical, shy. For the investigative type, some examples of occupations would be biologist, chemist, physicist, geologist, anthropologist, laboratory assistant, medical technician, so very science-oriented. Typical traits would be math and science abilities, like to work alone and solve problems. Might be described as analytical, complex, curious, independent, intellectual, introverted, precise, rational. The artistic type would be something like composer, musician, stage director, dancer, interior decorator, actor, writer. Typical traits, artistic skills, enjoys creating original work, has a good imagination, maybe described as complicated, idealistic, imaginative, impulsive, independent, introspective, original. the social type. So it would be people who are like teachers, speech therapists, religious workers, counselors, clinical psychologists, nurses. Likes to help, teach, and counsel. May be described as cooperative, friendly, generous, helpful, idealistic, kind, responsible, sympathetic, tactful, understanding, and warm. The enterprising type, so buyers, sports promoters, TV producers, business executives, people in sales, travel agents, supervisors, managers. Typical traits would be leadership and public speaking abilities, interested in money and politics, likes to influence people, described as acquisitive, agreeable, ambitious, attention-getting, energetic, extroverted, optimistic, self-confident, and sociable. And lastly, the conventional type, accounting, financial analyst, banking, tax experts, medical lab assistants. Some typical traits would be clerical and math abilities, like to work indoors and organize things, described as careful, efficient, orderly, persistent, practical, thrifty. So that's kind of a look at the 6 types. So if you're willing to share your Holland code, so the areas you scored highest in, and so the first letter would be the one that you scored the highest in and so forth. You can share those in the chat box, and I'll go ahead and utilize another resource I have, even though, you know, ONET is a really good resource for taking your results forward and doing research, as it's something that's kind of explained as you finish the ONET interest profiler. So, you know, what different groups we have. I'm going to look at the self-directed search occupations finder form just to give you an idea of some specific job matches for that type. If there are some, they're not always some. And that's why it's important to look at permutations, which is simply just rearranging the letters in your type. Because like I said before, let me jump back. If you have a code where the first 2 letters are across from one another, you have interests that aren't highly correlated. So there might not be a lot of specific job matches. So if you are a CAS, then it's going to be important to look at if there are CAS types, but if not, also CSA, SAC, SCA, ACSA, you know, you mix up the letters to look at the permutations to see other things that match too. And I'll, you know, ONET's a really good resource for that. There's some other resources I will share too. Let me bring up the chat here. Okay, so we have, first one was AI, and so I'm wondering what the 3rd letter was there. And maybe I got into the chat too late for me to see it. Let's see. Oh, there we go. An A and I. So, and sometimes when you do these assessments, if you were to do like a more formal version, you might only get a 2-letter code. So that does happen. But for the purposes of me showing off the occupations finder, I'll just look at the three letter codes to start with, just to give you an example. So Logan, looking at ECR, opening up my booklet here. Let me turn my camera back on. I'm having bandwidth issues today, but this is just, this isn't anything you would really need to have physically, but this is the self-directed search. It's another Holland assessment of career interests. And I don't know how well my camera's going to show, but it has these Holland codes and then direct occupational matches for them. And then codes for the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, which is another old print publication that has these all organized and allows people to access information about them. I'm going to show you a much more, a much easier to access resource a little bit later. But this is where I'm getting some of this information from, just so you know. Okay, so ECR, I'll flip to the ECR section to see what we have here, just to give you an example. RIASEC, SEC, okay, E. So let's look at, let me move my chat so I can see this. So ECR, you know, high consistency. I don't know what this, oh wait, I do know the scores are. 34, 28, 25. So with the SDS, there's a rule of 8, but this is different. So I don't know what the cutoff is, but there's a certain statistical number where your scoring. So for, the difference between, for you, Logan, enterprising 34, realistic 25, that score is far enough apart where I'm sure enterprising is probably number one, but with conventional and realistic, 28 and 25, only 3 points apart. I don't know what the score is specifically for ONET. For the SDS, it's 8 points, where they're saying it's statistically close enough where it might actually be flipped. And that's where an assessment, a better, more formal assessment like the strong interest inventory is going to give you a better picture. But for ECR, I would say that is I don't know what your other scores are, but I'm assuming it's going to keep tapering down like that. So I'd say it's a highly differentiated and highly consistent type. But so ECR, there should be some careers that they've identified as a fit for the ECR type. And there are. So again, this publication is the old print one. This one I'm holding is probably 10 years old. So the way that the job market is, there will be occupations in here that might not even really exist anymore, or that they're really not relevant because there aren't many opportunities. So for ECR, the career matches that match specifically to that are executive housekeeper, incinerator plant supervisor, maintenance chief, mapping supervisor, test desk supervisor, circulation clerk, furniture assembly supervisor, job tracer, relay dispatcher, sampler of minerals and earth, and an office helper. So you can see some of these occupation titles are very specific. And, you can use resources like this to look at things that are very specific. But the thing that I'm gonna show you later is gonna help you in a more meaningful way to look at things in terms of jobs as they are now and jobs that are flourishing now, and how to actually access that research. Let's see, for Ashland of 14, 14, 16, so EAS or ESA, those are all ESAs is a consistent score. E is next to S next to A, or EAS, it's they're close also. So let's look at some of those. EA, and then I'll do a non-E code. EAS, some examples of direct matches: broker and market operator. Oh, grain broker and market operator. Sometimes they do a backwards comma listing. Council on Aging director, fashion coordinator, seed production field manager, housing project manager, music supervisor, apparel and accessories sales, auctioneer, fashion model. Those are some EAS matches. Okay, I'm gonna scan down. ECS, we got CE. Those are all really high. So CEA. So let me do that one because that is an example of having really high scores. So, so for you, William, C33, enterprising 29, artistic 31. So CAE, those numbers are so close, it might actually be an ACE, it might be an ECA. I'm not sure, but it's one of those things. What you would do is, if you never actually took the more formal strong interest inventory, you would look at the types, you would look at the makeup of each one, and you would decide yourself. I relate more to this one over that one, so you would decide. But for the purposes of these scores, I'll say CAE, and that'll be at the end of RIASEC. And let's so CAE, that's helpful. Also looking at the hexagon here, CNA being adjacent, so those interests are not highly correlated. CAE, and also the scores being really high or really similar. There's not a lot of differentiation. So again, nothing good or bad about your score. It just suggests you might have more of a difficult time with your career exploration than someone else. So yeah, for CAE, C occupations listed under any code beginning with letter C because they are not highly correlated types. Let's see, so C, that was CAE. So let's do CEA to see what we can find. Nothing. Let's do ACE. Let's do ACE. We'll be right in the middle. ACE as I flip through. A, C, E. Give me something. It might be because it's yes, ACE, AIC, ACE. Yeah, it's another one. So that's the thing where it's nice having the ONET interest profiler to give you some options that you would not find if you actually did this self-directed search. I mean, it would still have, it would say the same thing, look up anything starting with C, anything starting with E, anything starting with A, or some combination thereof. So let me see if I can find anything else there. At least AE, AER, let's say, or AEI or AES. Just for example, AEI, arranger, intelligence research specialist, orchestrator, screenwriter, mime, package, mime is an AEI, that's cool. Package designer, puppeteer. So just there, my point being that there are a lot of different resources for you to help explore, occupational suggestions with your Holland code. There are not always going to be things that look right or feel right as you're looking at your results. That's why it's important to really, one, if you find the exercise to be meaningful, take a more formal version of this. But two, also what John Holland referred to as the rule of full exploration. Look at all the different permutations of your code to find some of those different results, some suggestions. Let's see. Okay. So I'm an SEA, but we've already gone through enough. I don't think we need to look at mine. So again, as you did the ONET interest profiler, you could search for job areas by codes and level of preparation needed. Green jobs, I think, is a really cool thing that they do with the ONET interest profiler. Good fit versus great fit based on yours, based on your results. And like I said, I was using the SDS here as another way to look at some of those. There's also an educational opportunities finder that does the same thing, matching your type to academic concentrations and majors. So I guess that's something I could do briefly here. I'll look at someone else's code to see how it relates to educational opportunities. So let's see, ESI, the most recent one on the chat, ESI, E30, so 34, yeah. So looking at the Educational Opportunities Finder, I will look under ESI. ESI, here we go, perfect. So in terms of academic areas that fit someone who has an ESI code because of the characteristics and makeup of these specific academic concentrations would be educational evaluation and research, educational statistics and research methods, elementary, middle, and secondary education administration, international business, international finance, law, nonprofit and public management, political science and government, and public finance. So there are some cool resources, depending on where you're at. If you're thinking of, I'm going back to pursue some further educations before I figure out what I want to do for a career, or if you're already in school and you already know what path you're on there, you really want to focus on exploring careers. There are different things you can do with your Holland code. Okay. So the resource I want to show you that is tied with ONET but the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And this is a resource to help you as you start to compile a list or lists of careers that you want to research further. I recommend using the Occupational Outlook Handbook to aid you with that research. And like I referenced before, what it does is it gets its name from forecasting the outlook for given jobs and job clusters. So there are hundreds of jobs that are listed in this resource. And for each one, and I'll show you some examples of the information there, but what they do for that job, what the work environment's like, how you actually become one, how do you pursue that career, what's the pay like for that career, what's the outlook, that's how it gets its name. Maybe you're researching something you find interesting, but there's too much education required to get into the field, or it doesn't pay well enough for you. There are similar occupations you can research also. And then helpful additional information too that I'll show you too. So just a moment while I share. my screen here. And this is at bls.gov/OOH. I'll put that in the chat box. And that BLS stands for Bureau of Labor Statistics. And OOH is Occupational Outlook Handbook. And like I said before, forecasts hundreds of different jobs in the country to give you some real helpful information as you are, researching career possibilities for you. It's updated pretty much, constantly. They're not updating every specific job or job cluster every year. It's just as they get the data, they will update the outlook for each different area. And it used to be a print publication. That's why it's called the handbook. It used to be an actual handbook. But again, there are a lot of different ways to do a search here. You could use just a simple search handbook search bar right here in this main bar at the top, banner, Occupational Outlook Handbook. There's an A through Z index to look at jobs alphabetically. I always like to refresh just to see what it brings up for featured occupations. Clinical lab, tech, and so if there's any specific job you want me to look up just to kind of show off how this tool can be used, then go ahead and enter that in the chat box. See if I can. Environmental scientists and specialists, we have that as an academic major. So let's just go ahead and look. And again, if you have anything you want me to look up, go ahead and enter that in the chat box. So for environmental scientists and specialists, the first page is just going to be a summary of everything that's there. So what do these people do? It'll have a list of duties for these types of careers. And then for something like this, where it's kind of a cluster, it'll hopefully have information to break it down further. And it does here for these areas of climate change analysts, environmental health and safety specialists, environmental restoration planners, industrial ecologists, environmental chemists. So it'll, ideally it'll give you some extra information about a specific type. What's the work environment like? How to become one, very important here. For most entry-level jobs, they will need a bachelor's degree in environmental science or something related. And then it'll talk about, so many environmental science programs include an internship. So more information about the educational aspect of it. Important qualities, so specific skills, advancement for this career, any licenses, certifications required for a given occupation. Of course, one of the most important things, pay for that occupation, and I'll break it down into different areas. So the highest being federal government, excluding postal service, engineering services, but a high range in general for the entire occupation. So the outlook, how is this job growing, or this cluster? Employment of environmental sciences and specialists is projected to grow 8% through last year to 2029, much faster than the average. And I would say that is no surprise to me, as that is obviously a focal point on a national stage and international stage. Job prospects. The next one will have employment data, state and area employment data for you to explore for a given one. So similar occupations, maybe you see something that didn't seem right to you. You can explore some other similar occupations, biochemists, biophysicists, chemists and material scientists, conservation scientists, and foresters. So you can see some things that seem very similar but are different. So conservation scientists. More info is an excellent tab for anyone is in the initial stages of career research, because it allows you to at least explore professional organizations and associations related to the area that you may want to pursue. So it's helpful just for research purposes of information gathering, but more importantly as a networking source. So you can connect with these different groups to find people that you can talk with about, what it's like to actually do this kind of job. How can I best prepare? All those informational interview questions. This is a great resource here to find a way to connect with them. And often it's a trail of breadcrumbs where you start here. Hopefully you can find some a name or some names, and maybe you have to go to LinkedIn and try to connect with them. But this is just a great starting point for that. So looking in the chat box, you can do a tax accountant, a political scientist, and event planning. Okay, see, so I think for some of these, it'll give us specifics, and for some, it'll be more general job cluster areas. Political scientists, go. Okay. So you can see the summary page. So some of the duties here. Research political subjects, collect and analyze data from sources, public opinion surveys. This is all very highly relevant right now and timely. Develop and test political theories, evaluate the effects of policies and laws on governments, business, people, etc. How to become one, I will highlight. It'll require a master's or PhD program. Applicants should have, to get into a grad program, they should have undergraduate courses in poli-sci, writing, stats, and have some kind of related work or internship experience. They often have a master's of public administration or public policy. Some other experiences and important qualifications here are analytical skills, communication skills, creativity, critical thinking skills. So, things that you would say, hey, if I am pursuing a graduate program, what are some of the skills I should be highlighting? How about my analytical skills, my communication skills, my creativity, and my critical thinking skills? So it helps give you information for your resumes also in grad school applications. Pay is going to be high, obviously, because it's at a graduate level. $122,000 in May 2019 was the median. And you can see the breakdown there. Outlook is the other thing I should highlight for each one. 6%, so faster than the average through 2029. So all that stuff tells you, it seems to be, as it's projected now, this seems to be, obviously it's an area that requires a lot of education. The pay is strong, and it's projected to be a good option through the next 9 years. Let's do tax accounting. So for this one, I'll break it down in different areas that might be more relevant to you. So I don't know, tax examiners versus accountants and auditors versus accounting and auditing clerks, but I'll just do general accounting and auditors here. What they do, again, the duties here. Different types, so government, management, public, external auditors, IT auditors, internal auditors. How to become one. It's going to talk about the CPA. Bachelor's degree in accounting or related field. Some prefer people who have a master's degree. Obviously, it mentions the CPA above for those pursuing that specifically, and it'll have that under licensing. Pay outlook should be strong. Not much of a range there for that. That's interesting. Outlook, projected to grow 4%, so that should be about average, right? Yeah, through 2029, about as fast as average for all occupations. And similar occupations, I guess, just because this is going to be more of a job cluster area. See some of the specific ones. Event planner, let's see what they give us for that. Meeting convention and event planner. So sometimes it does this where it has to cluster them together because there's just not enough data for each one specifically. So those are some of the duties, different types of planners. So meeting planners, convention planners, event planners, exhibition organizers, how to become one. Typically need a bachelor's degree and experience being helpful. Planners who have studied meeting and event management or hospitality management may start out with greater responsibilities than do those from other academic disciplines. A lot of good things to consider here. Skills to highlight: communication, interpersonal, negotiation, of course, organizational problem solving. The pay range. The median was just over 50,000 in May 2019. The lowest 10% earned less than about 8,000 and the highest 10% earn more than 86,000, so quite a range there. Job outlook. Employment is projected to grow 8% from 2019 to 2029. And that's another important thing for me to highlight, which I just thought of, giving this specific type of career involves a lot of social interaction. So this employment data is from 2019, not from 2020. So COVID-19 impact is not taken into account with these projections. It'll be really interesting to see how a lot of these things change in the next couple of years, as COVID has changed the landscape completely. So that is a look at the Occupational Outlook Handbook. Let me jump back over. And like I said, it's a great resource for you as you start to do any kind of assessment like this that offers you potential career matches. Ideally, be something like this career interest assessment, which is a more reliable source than, say, a personality assessment like the Myers-Briggs, which is its own merits, but not for career exploration specifically. But to take your research a step further using a resource like the Occupational Outlook Handbook that I recommend. There are these other types of assessment areas. I'm going to show you just a sample of the strong interest inventory, because that's an option for WSU students and alumni. If you are interested in that, it's $15, and it's this exact same kind of assessment. It's just a more formal and accurate version than this free one is. But there are, physical skills assessments, like the old Wisen test of mechanical aptitude. That was kind of a physical, tactile one. But there are online skills assessments. There are work values assessments that are really helpful, I think. That percentage, I'm sorry, I'll go back to your question also here in just a second. So work values assessments being very important, because for some people who, for most people, I shouldn't say some, most people don't have that aha moment, perfect career match. Most people change careers several different times throughout their lifetime. So what's important to you in a career is really helpful to use as you are researching careers. So what is important to me about this job? Autonomy, working with others, working alone. What's the pay like? Obviously is a really important work value. So doing a work value assessment, it can be helpful too, and there's one in ONET, as you are exploring careers. Personality assessments, I mentioned, like the Myers-Briggs, and fun social media assessments, like the ones on Facebook where they steal your information and sell them to different countries. I don't recommend those, but they can be fun. So what is the percentage of growth based on? It's just based on their projections on the data that the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, just the data that they gather, how they see growth and changing going forward. I don't have any of the specifics of how they compile their data. I'm not a data analyst, but their forecasting is based on all jobs throughout the country and markets in the country too. So I'm going to show you briefly the strong interest inventory. There's a good sample here. Is it Jane or Martin? It's Jane sample or Martin sample. So Martin sample. So this just gives you an idea of what it would look like if you did want to pursue the strong interest inventory. It'll give you a better look of what I mean by differentiation when you have your scores too. It's going to go over all the 6 different types like we've done here. And for fake person Martin sample, you got an ESR code, which is looking at the, oops, I'm going to look at the hexagon here really quickly. ESR, so E and S being adjacent, and then R being one off from E and opposite of S. It'll probably still, not a super highly consistent, but a fairly consistent code. Okay, back to that. Oh, I'm having some sharing problems. Just one moment. My screen sharing is not working. Just one moment. There it goes. Now I can see it. So ESR, and this is where you get an idea of the differentiation. So how you score in each section, and it's something you see also with your own results too. But you can see this one, which they've done well for the sample because it's a highly differentiated code where it's high in one area, it's still high in another based on interest level, but not as high in the standard score that they list on the right side, this number, and then moderate, and then little and little. You know, for the purposes of an example, it's nice that they were able to do this. You don't always see this though, when a person's doing their own. But just to give you an idea of how it is helpful, it'll break down jobs and job clusters even more so as you go on with the assessment results. So for each of the 6 areas, I would say this is atypical, where you'll have, so this area, highest area being enterprising, for sales, the standard score was highest and the interest level is also really high. And I'll talk about in a minute how the standard scores and the interest scores or levels are different and what that means. But most of these, job clusters or areas here are high for their highest area. And then for social, still mostly high and then moderate. And then for the next one, realistic, nothing high, moderate from athletics down to very low computer hardware and electronics. And then looking at the 3 other areas where this Martin sample scored lower, usually what you see is with people, and not always, but usually you would have some area here within one of these 3 areas where they scored lower that they still have a high interest level and maybe even very high, but their standard scores are lower based on the different sections that make up that. So what sections make up conventional here? Finance and investing, tax and accounting, office management, programming and information systems. So what you'll generally see is you can still find something in a general area where you may not have a lot of interest. There might be something in there once you break it down further that is actually still really appealing to you for you to research further. And it does these top 10 lists of most and least relevant occupations. I don't find them to be the most helpful things or most accurate always. Sometimes they are. But the strong interest inventory is gender normed from a binary perspective, I will admit, but gender normed and also takes into account interests and disinterests. And so this is how they make this assessment. They assess people working in hundreds of different occupations, and they select the people that are satisfied with their job. They like doing the work that they do. And then they look at their interest pattern. What do they like? What do they don't like? And what they're going to do with you is they're going to compare you based on how you identify as a man or a woman. Like I said, it's binary, which is a flaw, but that's just where they are. How you compare to other people in the gender you've identified who like doing the jobs that they're doing. So if you have a similar interest pattern, so you like and dislike the same things as them, and they do this job that they really like doing, it suggests that you might also really like doing that job. So that is how they norm this test. That's how it's built. And so this is where you really get into the meat and potatoes of the strong interest inventory. So anywhere where you get a standard score 40 or higher, it'll say, like it says here, from top life insurance agent, standard score of 66, down all the way to your restaurant manager here. You for Martin sample, who has identified as a man, you share interests with men in those occupations and probably would enjoy the work. From the mid-range 30 to 39 score, you share some interests with men in the occupation and probably would enjoy some of the work. Dissimilar, you share few interests with men in that occupation and probably would not enjoy the work. So that's how they do that. And you can see the breakdown for different areas in social. So the highest areas for this fake person being from Parks and Rec, down to social worker, realistic from law enforcement, down to radiologic technologist. Conventional, the high areas here, credit manager, down to customer service rep. And so this is where you get into the area where Martin sample didn't have a lot of interest, but he still got a mid-range result for a chiropractor. And I'd say this is atypical. If it's someone who's a real person doing the assessment, usually there will be some areas where usually there's, one that's at least in the similar results category. When you get into that section, let's see, here's a good example here. So for investigative, not a whole lot going on. But for artistic, public administrator still in that high area. And then there's some mid-range results from attorney down on through urban and regional planner. Personal style scale, I won't get into this part much. It kind of helps you, it overreaches here a little bit and kind of does a Myers-Briggsy thing where it talks about just work preferences. That is helpful as you're doing career research, but it's just kind of a snippet. There'll be, you know, some summaries of the information above, some action steps, some things you can do to plan ahead and take action. The one thing I wanted to highlight also right at the very end, I'm sorry, I'm going to scan down, is this skills confidence level section, which is included now in the strong interest inventory. So if you have a high interest level in a given area, but you don't have a very high confidence level, it'll say this is something to explore further. You need to, you know, develop your skills in this area to pursue it more. So high priority for Martin Sample here in social. There's a high interest level and there's a high confidence in the skills needed in order to do those jobs. Conventional, confidence level fairly high, interest level not very high. Possible option of interest develop. You know, for realistic, high priority because confidence is fairly high, interest is fairly high. Enterprising, good option if confidence and skills could be increased here at the very bottom. Fairly highly interested, but not very confident in the ability that you currently have those skills that are important for that specific type of the Holland code, of the Holland hexagon. So that is what the strong interest inventory looks like. And I believe, let's see if I'm able to get back to sharing here without it doing anything funky here. That should bring us to the end. So again, that's the hexagon. Showed you the strong. That's it. That does bring me to the end. Let me just pop over here to the chat to see if there's anything that was lingering. I don't see anything. So if you do have any questions, let me know and I will answer them. And if not, here's my contact information. I'm here to help Global Campus students with their career development questions. So go ahead and shoot me an email if you have any questions. And just some resources for connecting with me, the career support website at online.wsu.edu, and also the career guide blog found at the same place. Again, thank you so much for joining, and let me know if you have any questions.